I'm Dr. Craig Escude, the host of IDD Health Matters, a podcast where we talk about health, wellness, and health equity for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Hope you enjoy it. Hello, and welcome to this episode of IDD Health Matters. We have a really cool guest, a longtime friend and colleague today, David Toback. Welcome, David.
Hey, Craig. Thank you for having me.
Sure thing. So I want to get right into it. First, tell us how you began working in the field of supports and services for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities.
My work in that field, Craig, started in 2006 as an employee at Devereaux Foundation. It's a Georgia campus. At that time, I was providing therapy with youth, that is mental health and IDD at that time. But my work really intensified in the field in 2012 when I joined Georgia's Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Disabilities as part of their training and development staff. We did a lot of work in the central office to help the provider network provide services and supports, and also was heavily involved with the closure of the state-run institutions in Georgia at that time, and helping the provider networks that would then be lifting the load of support for those who had been in institutions and were transitioning into the community. So that's mainly where it began.
So you mentioned training. What type of training did you find was important, especially as these centers were, larger centers were closing down and people were more into the community? Are there certain things that you were focusing on back then?
Yes, there was actually two main movers of change in that work. The first actually was the health risk screening tool, being able to be aware of the health risks that people would have. What presentation would the people have that would require a response that may look a little different than the atypical population? The other piece was person-centered thinking. And it really centered, Craig, on helping the providers who would be basically taking the baton of support. What would it mean to take the learning that the institutions already had, but build upon it? Mm-hmm. Particularly living in a new situation where there were more opportunities to socialize, connect, and build community connections. How could the provider network do that? And we found that providing person-centered thinking training was a key to making that work successful.
So, okay, person-centered thinking training. What does that really mean?
There are a lot of rumors out there, Craig, about what it means and what it doesn't. So I'm very glad, doubly so, to be on this podcast to offer what it is. So person-centeredness really at its heart, Craig, begins with listening. It begins with listening and then asking and then confirming. There are those three major components: listening, responding, and then acting upon what you heard, that promote effectively a person being seen as such rather than a list of walking diagnoses or a disability that needs to either be coddled or worse, controlled. And
so wait. You're saying we should see people with disabilities as people?
Very controversial. I am that guy.
I know. Isn't it?
I know I went there. Bad David. The thing is, what I have found, and maybe you found this to be true in the work we both do, Craig, there is a need, a very deep need, meaningful need to connect with people at a human level and not support at people, but with people. And person-centeredness really kind of puts the road down for that with path to become a thing. And it really starts, again, with listening, responding, and then promoting those things that have been expressed on part of the person.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more. Now, let me ask this. So person-centered thinking, is it just something that you say, well, we just need to think about the person and what they want in their lives? Or are there actual, skills that people can learn that can help them to be able to do what you just described?
Absolutely. It's what I like to call in the business a both and solution, meaning that it is the thinking that you spoke about, Craig. We do want to think about the person as a person. It is also a very practical set of skills that take the learning from only conversation to action. So it is both.
So when I first started hearing about person-centered thinking years ago, my first thought was, well, what about people who can't tell you what they want in their lives, or verbally describe what's of importance to them, or how they want to spend their time? Are there ways that we can get an idea, let's say, of what a person might enjoy?
Indeed. There are ways to do so, Craig, because we all do this thing on the daily in our own lives. All of us, Craig, in the world we navigate and the story we author, use words and not words to communicate things. As someone who is married to a wonderful partner in life, Jackie, she is a gold medal Olympian in the event I call The Look. And with a single look, see, you're chuckling already, listeners. With a single look from my beloved, I know two things for certain, and she didn't have to say a word to do it. I am in the doghouse, and it's going to be a minute. Now, there is a grain of truth in this self-depreciating humor. Let's get to it for our listeners, that all of us communicate every day without speaking. So here comes the relevant piece that you mentioned, Craig. Yeah. When we're doing the work we do in allied health and IDD, we are going to cross paths with people that communicate in ways that we're unfamiliar with. Unfamiliar is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of discovery. And as I mentioned earlier, the practical nature of person-centeredness, there is in fact a specific skill that will address this thing. What are we observing the person do? Where are they providing this action? What is the environment? Mm-hmm. With some trial and error guesswork, using the skill to support our learning, we eventually discover what is the person feeling inside, and finally, how can we support them or not support them in that moment when we see these combination of factors. And so for those who may not be familiar, what I am describing is one skill of 11 called the communication chart that actually addresses this very thing, something we teach here at Intellectability quite often.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very well said, and I think the key take home is it's more than just say, yeah, well, I think about people and I want to facilitate what they want in their lives. It's recognizing, wait, there are skills that I can learn to do this much better. Now, I'm going to be quite open and say the other thing that I thought when I started hearing about person-centered services years ago was, wait a second, maybe the person with the disability might say that they just want to eat chocolate cake all day long every day. Does that mean we have to allow them to do that because that's what they want in their lives? And so can you speak to that aspect of it as well, too? And maybe how do we balance? I think balance is probably the key word in what's important for versus to someone.
Exactly. Craig, yes. Person-centeredness has attached to it something called the core concept. And the core concept in so many words is what you just described, the key word being balance, because none of us get everything we want whenever. That idea, it's not attainable. It's not a reality for anybody. I know it to be true, Craig, because we're not just talking to each other. We're speaking with listeners who are also not getting everything they want whenever, right. Not on a beach somewhere or...
Wait, it's not just me and you?
No,
what?
No, okay. It's not just you. It's not just you, boo-boo. It is really a lot of us that experience a mixture of circumstances. Things we get the breaks at times and we don't. That's being alive. So therefore, balance is going to come into play. So what are we balancing? That leads to what you mentioned, important to and important for. Generally speaking, important to are those aspects of your experience that matter to you, whether anyone else values them or not. So this could include, but not be limited to, the people you want to associate with or not, the culture you identify with, the educational pursuits you have in mind or are currently participating in, the job you hold, and the items you have, and on it goes. Balanced with important to, again, those things that matter to you, whether anyone else values them or not, is important for. Important for has three main aspects. That is health and safety, and not just the appearance of safety, Craig, but the experience of safety. There are two different things.
Mm-hmm.
And I mention that, Craig, because someone may appear safe, but feel threatened. And if you feel threatened, that's where, or under risk, that's where your energy goes.
Yeah, makes sense.
The second part of important for is being a valued and contributing member of the community you want to be a part of. So it's not simply existing, shuffling to a retail store and back, or just simply being out and about. It's being valued for being there. And the third component, again, is making sure that we're taking care of health and safety matters, getting adequate sleep, good balanced diet, adequate hydration, all the things that most of us it's important for us whether we value it or not. So we balance these things through negotiation. When an important to need is mentioned, it does not mean that it will automatically become present in your life. It means we're going to take deliberate steps through discovery and negotiated balance to make that thing happen, just like we would in our own lives.
You explained that wonderfully. And I think, when we look at the support system for people with IDD over the years, for many years, we were way too heavy on the side of what we think is important for that person. This person needs this, they need that, they're going to do this, without really letting them have a say-so in it, or opportunities to do things that they want to do. And we certainly have shifted and need to continue to shift to finding that balance and what works. I don't particularly enjoy the dentist, but it's important for me to go to the dentist. And so we're basically helping people to balance that. And speaking specifically about healthcare and medical care, I just want to contrast this with saying it's not the medical model when we talk about helping people have good health. When we talk about healthcare for people with IDD, the medical model is, basically if we say that, the intellectual disability is a problem and it needs to be fixed. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about helping people ensure that they have good health care and their health risks are identified, and what can be done to mitigate those is done. And that's something we all want for our own lives as well.
Yes.
So David, you have worked diligently to attain something in an area, and I'm going to have to ask you to tell me what it is again exactly, because I know I'm going to say it wrong. But it's an ambassador for Charting the LifeCourse. Is that
that is
right?
Correct? That's the correct phrasing. Yes.
So I hear a lot of times people say, "Oh, well, we don't do person-centered thinking. We use Charting the LifeCourse, or we use, we do the person-centered thinking stuff, but we don't use Charting the LifeCourse." And can you talk? I don't understand that fully. Can you help explain what all of that looks like and how they interrelate?
Yes, I can. So, as mentioned earlier in our conversation, person-centeredness and person-centered thinking and skills really give us the means to begin the discovery process that leads to learning, that leads to support opportunities. What I have found Charting the LifeCourse to do is to complement the learning that person-centeredness opens up in such a way where we are able to incorporate multiple players in the conversation that have a piece to the support narrative in terms of what they might like to see the person achieve, what they have been working towards, how can we collect the resources that will help us get towards the goal that the person desires. Charting the LifeCourse really helps to identify these details that are needed to keep the steps ascending towards the ultimate goal. And that's how I see the two as complementary.
Okay, so Charting the LifeCourse is a system, right?
Yes, it is.
Okay, and so there's a certain way to employ that system in support of people with IDD.
Yes.
Okay. Does using that negate the need to have training on how to think in a person-centered way, or
absolutely
is it
not?
Okay. So
in fact, I have found in conversations with other allied health professionals who run in either person-centered circles and Charting the LifeCourse circles, what has really struck me is that both have the same end game in mind. Both want to promote the lives of those we serve in ways that ensure that the person is the driver of the service delivery and also ultimately the narrative of their story. Again, balancing those things that are health and safety matters with those that are the desired outcomes. So what ends up happening is people will be introduced to one or the other and find themselves mainly focusing on that which they were originally introduced to. Mm-hmm. And what I am offering to our listeners is that both can work together. So for example, on the person-centered side, since we've mentioned it, we can start by talking about the core concept a little bit, discovering by way of, say, somebody's rituals and routines around getting ready for work. We can open the door to discovery about what a person values in terms of feeling prepared and being that contributor at work. When we discover these elements that are values, we can best support them by looking at charting the LifeCourse tools, in particular the life trajectory. We can take a look at this life trajectory and then further take the discovery from person-centeredness and say, okay, this is where we would like the career to evolve to based on the values we first identified in person-centeredness. We can take the life trajectory and say, all right, in 3 years' time, not only are we working kind of at the start level, but now we're working towards maybe co-managing or maybe training or maybe something else. And again, these two work together because when the person's work experience advances and becomes more complex, we may learn new values back on the person-centered side, which then feeds back to what we want the future to look like. So they complement each other.
They complement each other, and they almost sound a bit synergistic. Where
Very much so.
You know, having those person-centered skill sets can facilitate even better usage of the Charting the LifeCourse system.
Yes.
And it's kind of like the fundamentals in a way. It's like, okay, these are how we identify what's important to a person versus what's important for a person, and how we put all of that down. And then the Charting the LifeCourse can help, well, in a similar but different way. And yes. And you kind of almost really, I may be oversimplifying this, but almost need those person-centered skill sets to be able to really utilize the Charting the LifeCourse to its fullest. Is that reasonable? I don't want to.
That is extremely reasonable. And Craig, if I may add another component to the discussion, I want to make sure that our listeners understand that identifying values, whether it's person-centered tools or Charting the LifeCourse, directly asking anybody what is important to you, that question by itself is ineffective because the question is too large to answer reliably.
I agree with that.
When faced with it directly.
Yep.
So that's why, as you stated, the synergistic relationship between person-centered approaches and LifeCourse strategies work for the same aim, to break down that information which we need access to if we're going to be effective supporters.
That's excellent and very, very well said. So let's maybe shift a little bit. Are there some other aspects of what you do that you'd like to share with everybody? I know there probably are.
A few. I'm very fortunate, Craig, that you and I are friends and colleagues and work for Intellectability, a company that prides itself, again, on replacing risk with health and wellness, and I would say life growth opportunities. So in terms of life growth and how can people do this work in a way where they feel like they're connected to the passion that connected to them to the work in the first place, my recommendation, selfishly, is to consider our training services. We do offer training on person-centered thinking in terms of how to not only understand the core concept, but also the discovery process, how we are able to engage with people we support in the process of learning that which is important and to and for them, and bolstering that aim with the skills that person-centered thinking talks about. We have designed a rather savvy electronic person-centered description
Yep.
that, again, houses this information in a shareable way. And again, being that I am now part of the Charting the LifeCourse community, we can also work with our clients to explore the use of LifeCourse charting to further get people not only in compliance, because, of course, our work does ask us to remain in a certain compliance latitude and longitude based on the HCBS settings rule and any number of other regulatory expectations that states, area agencies, counties, municipalities may ask of. But beyond the regulatory expectations, I believe this work, Craig, attracts to its numbers people who have a desire to be of service with other human beings in one capacity or another. I think that's part of the attraction of the work for people who find the work and stay with the work. So if you use person-centered thinking, Charting the LifeCourse, both, you will by default amplify the passion that brought you here and kept you here. Because if your goal is to be of meaningful presence and support with another human being, using these approaches is where it's at.
I love the way you stated that, and that is, it's one of the reasons we do this podcast, is to help people see the field of supports and services for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities as a viable career opportunity, a place where you can, grow, you can, go up the career ladder in many different ways. Yes. And you're serving people and you work with people that, it's beneficial for the people you're supporting, but I find it very beneficial personally as well. And I know, just like yourself, you started off working in the field directly and then moved to our company. I did the same thing. I provided healthcare for people with IDD for 20 plus years clinically, and then moved to our company. And we have a lot of people that in our organization that have had that same experience from all different levels. They started off as service providers. And for me personally, what I was able to do and what helped me to be able to say, okay, I'm going to leave my clinical practice where I, was directly working with people with IDD to move in this realm was that it really allowed the opportunity to expand the audience, I guess, and still help people. Maybe I'm not directly writing a prescription for a person, but we're writing training and developing, mechanisms and ways that other supporters can identify health risks and improve health outcomes in a very person-centered and balanced way. And that's very fulfilling and very, very rewarding.
Agreed.
I'm Dr. Craig Escude, President of Intellectability. State developmental disability agencies, managed care organizations, and providers across the United States use Intellectability's health risk screening tool, e-learn courses, and person-centered training to improve health equity for people with IDD. Visit replacingrisks.com to learn more about how you can employ these tools with people you support. So, David, one of the things I always do in the program is I ask people to give us 3 things, and I used to call it 3 and 3 and 3 things in 3 minutes, and I'm not so concerned about that. But just give me your top 3 things that you would like the audience to know that you think can improve the world for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities.
All right, I have those 3. My first is a phrase I share with any student or anyone who attends our sessions, and it's a question and a phrase. Ask about the ask. Ask about the ask is something that will help anyone along the path of learning what is in fact important to people, because what people value may not be obvious on first pass. The ask about the ask phrase and question helps us to dig deeper to figure out what motivated the mentioned item, statement, desire, outcome. The second thing I would offer is a question. And it's a healthy question to ask in our interactions in everyday life, and especially in the work that we do. And the question is this: do you need me to help, or do you need me to listen?
Wow, that's actually something I think we can all use in our lives.
Indeed. Yeah. And I want to go back to something I mentioned earlier, Craig, about how this work attracts to its numbers people who want to be of service. I believe asking the question, do you need me to help or do you need me to listen, is a meaningful pump of the brakes before we move into help, which is our inclination. Mm-hmm. Is our help meeting the need at hand? Which is why I think the question has great serviceability. Not just for us, but in our own everyday lives. I think we can all perhaps relate to being in a situation where you were sharing a struggle and somebody said, well, here's your solution. And you're going, slow your roll. I don't need a solution. I need your presence. I need you to hear me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the people that we support who have disabilities or support needs of any kind want that listening from time to time, in addition to what we can offer. But before we move, do you need me to help or do you need me to listen?
That's great.
The third thing I would offer, and this is connected specifically, Craig, when we are supporting the people we work for in making choices, because choice making is an empowering act. It leads to the outcomes and the next steps that create our story. So choice making is critical, and how we support it equally so. When we are doing the work of exploration of choice-making options and what decisions are available, are we working, Craig, from a place of wisdom or convenience? And the reason why I ask that question is because, as mentioned earlier in our podcast, there are times where any one of us in this work will feel under the pressure of a compliance or a regulatory demand. That is real. I don't want to dismiss that. What I also want to acknowledge in mentioning this reality is at all possible, don't permit that pressure to dictate the terms of service delivery alone, right? I'm not saying it's not real.
Right.
But I'm saying it need not be the end of the story. So are we working from a place of wisdom or convenience? If we're working from a place of wisdom, Craig, it's likely that we spent time in that place of discovery that started our conversation. What is it the person wants as an outcome? Have we offered some options? Have we discussed them? Have we shared, if we have such trust with the person, have we shared a cautionary tale or such to explore what options are available and how choices might look at the end of the day? If we're moving at speed or convenience, we may be inadvertently running over the very people that we're supposed to be working for.
David, those are three excellent points. Ask about the ask, a place of convenience or a place of wisdom. Mm-hmm. And the other was,
do you need me to help or do you need me to listen?
Help or listen. Wow. I love that one in particular. I'm just thinking about it so many ways in my personal life that would probably save me a lot of grief.
Indeed.
Yeah. Well, David, thank you so much for joining me today. But more importantly, thank you for the incredible work that you have done in this field. And I look forward to catching up with you again soon.
Same here, Craig. Thank you. And thank you to your listeners as well.
The IDD Health Matters podcast is a production of Intellectability. Learn more about our health risk reduction tools and training for supporters of people with IDD by visiting replacingrisk.com.